YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage in the patch notes. Now you all saw that the title of the video is just some unit testing and stuff, but let's also talk about the patch notes. I'm gonna focus on the patch notes part that's about unit balancing. This is what impacts multiplayer. There's a ton of patches that impact the campaign, the most important of which is really the Bretonnia changes that they go over in the beginning, so you should go check that out. It's pretty cool changes. I'd like to talk about that at some point too. I just haven't gotten a chance to look at it in depth, and I know that this video seems rather late, but I wanted to make sure I got a chance to read these and see what I thought. I haven't gotten to do expensive testing on any of this stuff. Now, we'll do some testing tonight, and it was just, the testing tonight isn't necessarily related to the patch notes, but we are going to be doing some testing. So, here's the thing. When I read through the unit balancing notes, I have some general thoughts in my head in terms of where the factions are at and what kind of makes sense. So as I go through a faction, so for instance, Beastmen, in the last patch, Beastmen they're in kind of an okay spot. Okay. So not great, just kind of okay. And they need some of their, let me switch over to the game. They need some of their units back. So if we're taking a look at the Beastmen, they don't have their Regiments of Renown yet because they haven't brought in all that stuff that came with the Norska patch last time. So really, Beastmen just needs their Regiments of Renown, but right now they're kind of weak because they don't have that. They're not terrible, they're a little bit weak. And so when we go look at the patch notes, what did they do? So again, I'm gonna come take a look at these things. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tab, hold on. Desktop, there we go. Yeah, so if we go back and start looking at the patch notes, the question is, why? I mean, so like Gore was the one decent infantry unit they have, and they just straight up nerfed it. I mean, the -1 melee damage probably isn't a huge deal, but you increase the cost? Why? Because the Beastmen have access to like so much else? Again, don't understand that. Hey, let's Ungor Herd -1 leadership picked up a charge bonus. That probably kind of results in a buff, not by a lot. Ungor Spear Herd. Now, how many of us were like, dude, you know what? Ungor Spear Herds are just too strong. You need to take away some hit points. Really? I mean, I know it's not going to be that big of an effect because I think there's only like 100 or 120 units in the model, so 120 hit points total. But who was sitting around saying, let's nerf Ungor Spear Herd? Ungor Spear Herd with shields. Take away leadership, hit points, but make them cheaper. Okay, I mean, at least they got cheaper. We can't say the same for the Ungor Spear Herd. So I don't know what to think of that one. Gore Herd, okay, gain melee damage, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you go read through all this. Go read through all of it. A couple of units get some buffing, but the Cygor gets nerfed because of marksmanship. Kazrak does get a slight buff because his cost is brought down, but I mean, in general, when you look at this, I mean, just considering the state of balancing, why would you do anything that weakens the Beastmen units? Like, was there some great outcry that like Gore were too good, or like all this? I'm just a little confused by the Beastmen patching, to be honest. Y'all tell me what you think. Am I off? If I'm off, I'm off. It's okay. I'm just saying that I don't understand why you really made many adjustments to the Beastmen that weren't just slightly improving them, because that's where they sit right now as a faction. Again, give them the Regiments of Renown. I think these guys are going to be pretty darn solid. But like, they also nerfed Centaurs with great weapons. This is one of the best units that the Beastmen had access to. A very unique unit that did a lot of good stuff, and they removed splash attacks, which means that these things are probably kind of underperformed now, especially for their cost. I don't know, I'd have to go test it. Again, interesting, strange. Strange. Now, Bretonnia overall got a bunch of buffs. Some units got cheaper, they picked up hit points. Pegasus Knights picked up mass. I mean, all around, Bretonnia pretty much got buffs across the board. I mean, the Hippogriff for Lewin ends up costing a little more. But, I mean, again, mostly, all in all, pretty much a buffing. And a couple other important things to notice, like Grail Knights picked up a little more AP damage, stuff that's going to help them out. So, okay, I like this. Bretonnia, they were probably one of the weakest factions in the game in the current state of it. This generally makes sense. Bretonnia picked up some buffing. Great. All right, Chaos. Again, another faction. Chaos is a fun faction, and they're pretty decent against certain factions. What's frustrating about Chaos is that a lot of their infantry units are just kind of unusable in multiplayer. Again, we're talking multiplayer here. They're kind of unusable because of cost, namely Chosen. And so what do? They come in. Okay, sweet. All the Chosen picked up a few hit points. That's good. Won't complain. Not many Chosen in a unit, though. So if there's like 60 men or warriors or whatever you want to call it, we pick up 60 hit points. I mean, it's probably like 1%. So I don't know. I'd have to go look at their number of hit points to see what it is, but it's probably not that much. All right, well, buff's a buff. We won't complain, right? Chosen with great weapons. All right, more melee attack. That's good. More melee damage. Okay, more AP cost. Looking good. What? What? Plus 50 multiplayer cost? 50 multiplayer cost. Really? Creative Assembly? Okay. I mean, the problem with Chosen wasn't necessarily their melee stats, was it? Who of us was complaining about the melee stats on Chosen? Again, I don't know where they come up with this stuff. Who was complaining about melee stats? No one. Everyone complained about Chosen because they're easy to rout, and they're a giant artillery and magic target. So they cost a ton, and when you try and use them, they just get wrecked by artillery, skirmishers, and magic. You didn't need to come in and buff the stats on them. It's not going to matter. And then you increase the cost because you give them buff stats. It just makes the problem worse. Now these guys are even worse. Like, even though you buff their stats, you just made this unit worse in multiplayer. Maybe better in campaign, but in multiplayer, Chosen are now even worse. The Chosen with great weapons are. I mean, and then it says in addition to the +1 above, right? So the +1 HP in addition to the +1 above. So I guess Chosen with Halberds got a few more HP. Again, there's only like 60 guys in the unit, so 120. Not a big deal. So I mean, really nothing to help Chosen in here. Chosen are still just artillery targets, relatively easy to rout, not going to be worth it in multiplayer. So that's just frustrating, honestly, to see. There's a very, very limited few situations where Chosen makes sense in multiplayer, which means that Chaos is going to continue to be pretty much a Dragon Ogre Rush faction. I mean, that's pretty much what they're going to be. They have a few other tricks up their sleeve, but that's pretty much it. There's a few other weird things here. Okay, Chaos Knights all picked up hit points. That's probably good. Most Chaos Knight units, you don't see them used a ton because they're on that borderline of kind of being too expensive to be worth it. Occasionally they're good, but again, they're pretty expensive. All right, great. They all gained hit points. But then you come in here, okay, we'll trade a regular for an AP damage. Nothing bad about that. So Chaos Knights, they didn't do anything to make it worse. Made the situation slightly better. Hell Cannon, they reworked the Hell Cannon to make it more accurate in the automatic fire, like where you put it in auto fire, not the player controlled. But then it does less damage and reloads faster. But this was... Again, this was kind of a weird move. Like, who asked them to rework the Hell Cannon? The Hell Cannon was in an interesting place as it was. Yes, it's very expensive and it misses a lot. But that was kind of the purpose of the Hell Cannon. You're kind of supposed to manually shoot it. And then it does tons of damage regardless. So, I don't know. Again, it's like, who asked for this? It's just strange to me. I'm not sure that this breaks Chaos or anything, but like, why? Okay, let's keep going through the list here. I don't have time to cover everything on this list. I'm just covering Beastmen and Chaos here, really, and I'll talk a little bit about the Dwarves, because they were the ones that kind of stuck out to me. There's a lot of other notes. But yeah, so Chaos, let's keep going here. So Kolek got more expensive. Why? He can't heal. He gets wrecked by a Necrosphinx. There's dragons all over the battlefield now that he has to... Like, why would you nerf Kolek? He's already very expensive. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, this is completely inexplicable to me. Again, maybe I'm taking it too far. I'm open to suggestions. You all correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, took away charge bonus from Dragon Ogres. Fortunately, it's not much. But again, with the appearance of Necrosphinx and them being pretty much straight up better for the same cost, why would you come in and nerf Dragon Ogre Shaggoths? Alright, whatever. Archaon gets a buff. Good. It's not going to hurt anything. Sigvald gets a buff. Good. Pretty much the same thing for the Chaos Lords, except they also get increased cost. And same thing with Sigvald. Okay, I guess. Fair enough. But, again, I sometimes wonder maybe I'm overreacting, but sometimes I wonder, like, CA does a lot of good things, but when it comes to the multiplayer stuff, like, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Who was calling for these things? And when you think about balance, you really need to focus all your balance around multiplayer, because campaign is unbalanced by nature. I can upgrade my lords, I can pick up magic items and banners and all that other stuff, so campaign's gonna be unbalanced. There is no balancing a campaign. You know what I mean? It really needs to be balanced around the multiplayer. So if any of these changes, if someone says, well, it's because of campaign, yeah, I don't know, in my opinion, that needs to be knocked off. I know more people play campaign than they do multiplayer, but again, balancing campaign is by nature unbalanced, because it's up to the player to drive how good their units are going to be. I don't know, just my thoughts. The last few things that I really kind of liked, they added a bunch of mass to the dwarves so that chariots just can't pull through them as easy. This was a good change. There was one really weird change. Again, this is another one of those ones where I would ask CA, alright, organ guns, how many people were getting wrecked by overpowered organ guns? The answer to that question is no one. No one was getting wrecked by overpowered organ guns, yet we come in here and we increase the cost of organ guns and take away accuracy. Why? Dwarf artillery is already questionably good in some cases, and you come in and nerf the organ gun that was already pretty much useless in multiplayer. Again, I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting. It's just strange. Like, who was calling for this, and why did you listen to them? Have you played the game recently in multiplayer? What is the purpose? Alright, I'm done ranting. Let's go test units. I'll see you in the game. So it seems like that the patch was definitely a lot of good things for campaign, because Bretonnia got some patches, and we still hope to see some changes in terms of Norska and all that stuff eventually getting patched in, which I think is still a little ways out. I want to say I've been told that it may be as far out as like May or March or something like that. Anyway, a lot of good things in the patch. I probably sounded really negative a minute ago. There are some good things in the patch. There's just a lot of things too that it's like, why did you do that? And seriously, how much time have you been spending in the game to make a mistake like that? And that sounds mean, but at some point, I gotta be critical of things that I feel like deserve it. Again, if you all think I'm wrong, I'll read the comments, and if I need to change my mind, I'll change my mind. I'm open to it. But let's do some unit testing. So tonight, I wanted to test some different heavy infantry units and kind of determine who has the best heavy infantry in terms of killing other infantry. So I think that's going to be the focus of the unit test tonight, outside of that discussion over the patch notes. So let's get right into it. Alright, we're going to start out the unit testing of infantry kind of towards the bottom of the pack. So we're going to have Bretonian foot squires going up against Empire greatswords. I would expect the greatswords to carry this. They cost quite a bit more. Bretonian foot squires are some of the, or they probably are the lowest cost anti-armor infantry, like great weapon type infantry. We've got column formation, standard deployment formation, and widest formation. And we're going to see how the fight goes. That actually went really good for the foot squires there, because they have a better charge bonus, and they also have more damage. It's just that there's more melee defense and attack on the greatswords. So let's see. So basically, why do I do these different formations? Well, column formation kind of gives you an idea of who's going to win like a really long grind out fight, because the charge won't play as much. This one gives us the middle of the road. And then the widely spread one tells us, you know, a pretty common occurrence, which is two units are going to give each other a solid charge on the battlefield. So we can see the greatswords are definitely going to come off victor in the widest formation. Greatswords are looking to come off victor in the standard formation, and then a longer slog out fight here. But it still looks like it's going to favor the greatswords as expected, pretty much across the board. Let's go ahead and hit fast forward here on my other computer, because remember, I'm testing against myself here. Right? I've tested against myself in the sense that I'm controlling a laptop and my desktop so that these are accurate and there's no AI nonsense. So this fight was won with 53 left for the greatswords. This fight is going to be won here shortly. So greatswords won with 49 left. And then in this fight, greatswords just better all around. They also cost more. So, no big surprise in this match. Let's just see where this one ends up, though. We've got it on fast forward. The fight actually lasts a very long time. So if you're Bretonnia and you want the fight to last a long time for your cavalry to do some work, you've got to somehow slow down the charges of other units. But in any case, there you go. So, greatswords easily win this one. We're going to go ahead and admit defeat. And let's head to the next test. First, let's check out the stats, like how that ended up. So yeah, there you go. The Bretonnian troops, there's the number of kills. So none of them even achieving half of a greatsword unit killed. So not a cost-effective trade for the foot squires at all in that case. And again, not the place where you want your foot squires. Let's go do some more testing. By the way the unit testing is going to work here is that if a unit wins, it's going to stay, and it's going to take on the next unit. So that's how we're going to play this. Alright, so with the foot squires eliminated, I'm going to move on to Longbeards with great weapons. They cost 750, and honestly, they've got some pretty dang good stats. At 100 armor, 88 leadership, immune to psychology. I believe they even have a charge defense against large. Which makes them a very interesting unit indeed. They have solid weapon damage at 34. Their charge bonus is a little bit lacking. They do not possess an anti-infantry like greatswords do, so this will be an interesting matchup. So up over here again, this is where the full effects of the charge can be felt. Greatswords have a bonus versus infantry, and they also have a better charge bonus. So not surprising the greatswords took an early lead. Here the greatswords taking a lead, whereas in this matchup, a little more even here. So this represents a fight where neither unit got a good charge, basically. So let's see how this is going to play out. I mean, it looks like the greatswords are going to clearly win. Clearly going to win this fight, where the Longbeards with great weapons were fully spread out. The other fights are definitely looking a little more close to call. I'm going to hit fast forward on both computers so that we can speed this up a bit. There we go. So both computers fast forwarding. Greatsword's gonna clean that fight up, but man, look how close those Longbeards bring it in the end because of their leadership. I'm gonna stop this unit from chasing just to get it out of the way. Let's see the next fight here. So Greatsword's kind of wrapping up this fight. Man, look how long the fight lasts here. So Longbeards with great weapons have the potential to outlast Greatswords for sure. And they cost a lot less. So this is a pretty decent trade in my opinion for the dwarves. And over here, yeah, I mean, so one way or the other, the greatswords end up winning. But I think that's a pretty good trade. What do you all think? They cost a full-on 200 less. The Longbeard with great weapon, and it's immune to psychology, and it has charge bonus versus large. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and let the greatswords stay in because they won. But to me, that's really a solid unit in the Longbeard with great weapon. Nice unit for the dwarves. It seems like a good value for the cost. Like, it's still got pretty decent killing power against other infantry, but it also kind of has the mixed bonus of withstanding cavalry charges better than most of these kind of units was because it has a better mass and it has the charge defense against large. So I think that makes Longbeards with great weapons kind of unique in the sense that they're not necessarily geared to be just an anti-infantry role. But again, I like the trade on these guys. I think it's pretty good. You all tell me what you think. All right, so we're here in the next test. This is actually going to be Skaven Death Runners. They're right in the same price range. They are anti-armor, and they have a debuff here. It takes away 50 armor from an opponent. They have very little armor themselves, which makes them somewhat unique, but they're also unique in the sense that they have stalk and a couple other interesting traits. They have 30% physical resistance, which is a big deal. They get a constant buff to themselves if their hit points are less than 50% of the base, which gives them extra defense and leadership to help them last a bit longer. And they have the special ability, which can help them stay hidden. And actually right now, even at this range, I'm still hidden to the greatsword units. Let's click attack orders. And now, as soon as I can see the units with the great swords on the other computer, I'll click a counterattack, but I still can't see them on my other computer. They just now became visible, so that would be an interesting advantage. I am going to get a counter charge with each unit. So, massive armor debuff, less armor over here. Really good melee defense here. Did I read that wrong? Hold on. Okay, it's disabled if it goes less than 50%, my bad. Yeah, so it's active at 50% and above. It's my bad, yeah. Greatswords over here are gonna pull off a clean victory. It's gotta be the armor playing into there to some extent. Melee defense is a bit better, but the armor has to make a difference. And then there's a bonus versus infantry on the great swords. I mean, Death Runners are doing a massive debuff here. It's an interesting one. But when it comes to just getting a clean charge, the great swords are pummeling the Death Runners. Over here, though, in this fight where, you know, the charge bonuses don't stack up the same from being in a column, the Death Runners are actually running even. And that's really interesting because the Death Runners actually have the better charge bonus. Let's see, 90 units in the great swords versus 75 in the Death Runners. So even though the Death Runners have a slightly better charge bonus, you got the bonus versus infantry and then 15 more units in the great sword. I'm not going to re-engage the fight where the Death Runners came back from rounding. I just want to let it play out here. I'm going to fast forward. Let's see what happens as these fights finish off. It's actually going to end up being a very close fight in the center and in the column formation. Leadership may come down to leadership there in the center. Look at that fight. So the Death Runners just barely lose. And let's watch this other one. That was a very close fight there. This one's also going to be close, and look how long it lasts. So, I mean, all in all, it looks like these units are very different in their purpose. Death Runners are a surprise element, right? They're meant to stalk and sneak up and surprise enemy units, get around flanks, maybe debuff units so that other units like Plague Monks or Clan Rats can do better. So clearly the Death Runner is more of a specialty unit, whereas the Greatsword is meant as more of a mainline unit. But still, I mean, you get a pretty solid trade there, with the way that those guys traded with the Greatswords in a long run fight. You know, so if the charge doesn't go too in favor of the Greatsword, you actually get a really nice trade with the Death Runners. So interesting results, but again, the Great Swords are going to stay. What do you all think about the trade-offs there? I mean, in my mind, it's an interesting fight. Clearly, the Great Swords win, but I think the Death Runner isn't meant to be that mainline counter unit to the Great Swords. I think they're supposed to help, like, debuff things so that Clan Rats and Monks and other stuff can do better, or to get an ambush. You all tell me what you think. Let's see defeat and just get a quick look at the stats here in terms of total kills for the Death Runners. Remember, there's fewer Death Runners, like we pointed out. Fewer of them in the unit. So Death Runners actually got more kills than the Great Swords. These must have been the drawn-out fights. And this is the one on the charge. So on the charge, the Great Swords got more kills, but the Death Runners actually got more kills in the fights that didn't rely on the charge bonus. You all tell me what you think of that result. That one's interesting. Alright, the next test is going to be Gore versus Great Swords. Gore having recently been nerfed by adding 50 cost to them, which is rather strange. I mean, they do have pretty decent stats. They've got really good weapon strength, really good melee attack, and really good charge. I don't know. Maybe this makes sense. But like I said, overall, since the Beastmen are kind of weak, I didn't really agree with this change. And to no great surprise, the Gore are whooping up on the Great Swords pretty handily. They also have immune to psychology, which the Great Swords don't. So, again, Gore herd. They've got this primal fury as well too, as long as their leaders as long as their leadership's over 50%. So they're getting even more attack. So Gore gonna come in and perform very well here. Gonna annihilate the Great Swords and become kind of the new base here. Let's go ahead and fast forward so we can see the results a bit quicker. So in the straight up charge, Gore are going to win, albeit not terribly convincingly. The Great Swords ended up doing really good over time. It's the bonus versus infantry, I think, that helps the Great Swords end up being decently... Oh my gosh, I thought the Great Swords were going to turn that around. That was close. So charge to charge, the Great Swords basically made that an even fight. Where the charge wasn't as good, the Gore did really good. Now that's really strange. It's got to be something with the formation. Gore can't spread as wide as Great Swords. Maybe it had something to do with that. because I spread both of them as wide as they would go and then fought. It looks like, you know, just you see it here, statistically the Bestigor are just better. And so where the charge played, you know, a little bit less difference, the Bestigor did better. This one's really interesting to me. The fact that these two would be actually somewhat different from each other, like 500 hit points different, that's a little bit odd. And then this one here. So I don't know, all around Bestigor's a better unit, so they're going to become the new base. We'll move on from there. Let's concede defeat so we can see the results in the battle here and take a look. So yeah, Bestigor racking up a lot of kills. The great swords did a lot of hit point damage. I believe there are fewer Bestigor in each unit. Yeah, only 75 to 90. So part of the reason why the great swords got less kill, but Bestigor going to be the new standard here. Alright, the next test is going to be Graveguard with great weapons up against great swords. These guys cost the same. Now I'm doing a bit of a mixed bag of test here. Kimmler is going to stay close enough to heal these two units with his passive, and then I'm going to keep the Empire Captain close enough, or the Empire General close enough to buff these two units. Oh, hold on, I got to pause it. About to mess up the test. Give me just a second. I got to move this Empire General. No, he's good. Alright, I'm just making sure the Empire General doesn't get too close to the fight. And Kimmler's got to be close enough to the fight right here, too. Okay, let's hit play. And then this fight over here, neither one of these, like this unit's close enough to get, I think some of the leadership aura of Kimmler, but it's not close enough to get the healing, if you all notice there. But these two units are. They're close enough to be healed by Kimmler. So what I wanted to see is, I think it's pretty typical for vampires to have a healing aura, and so I wanted to test with that, but I also wanted to see what happens in a test without it. This won't show us all three scenarios without it, but it'll say, like, alright, if there's a slug-out fight between Graveguard with great weapons and great swords, it'll tell us who's going to win. It may not account for the charge, but even over here with the healing, Graveguard with great weapons have lower leadership, about the same armor, but they're also going to have higher melee damage and a bonus versus infantry as well, but their melee attack and melee defense is quite a bit lower. And even with the healing, you can see that this Graveguard is struggling. However, remember that vampire units don't rout. They have to crumble. So when it comes to just a head-to-head fight like this, they may start losing quick and end up turning it around. It's hard to say. And again, with Kimmler here doing some healing, now they're crumbling. So we'll see whether the great swords can do enough damage to crumble these guys out. So again, vampire infantry tends to be slightly worse than other infantry pound for pound, but it's the leadership bonuses brought by the leaders. And again, I kept leaders close by for both just to try and make this somewhat fair, since Kimmler's also imparting a leadership bonus for being nearby these troops. And it looks like the Graveguard with great weapon, man, this is going to be close because of the crumbling. There is crumbling, and these guys are diminished. I believe that the great swords are going to take that one just by the skin of their teeth. Let's see what happens. Oh man, it's close. Yeah, the Graveguard are going to lose just barely to the great swords right there. So I mean, this is a very close match. But again, this is best case scenario. So this is with an enemy or a lord nearby healing, a passive heal. Now, could you use Invocation to Heck? Sure. And the Graveguard with great weapon would clearly win if I used Invocation to Heck. But could I also use Earth Bloom or Life? What is it? Lifeblood, Earthblood, whatever it's called. Earthblood, I think. Could I use that on the great swords? Yeah. I mean, so I don't want to start testing all these other crazy scenarios. I mean, it just looks like that even with the passive healing, a great sword ends up being a better unit. They're equal in number, but it's the melee attack and melee defense that does it. So yes, the Graveguard with great weapon has considerably better weapon strength, but again, in the long run, it doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter. The melee attack and the damage is too much for the Graveguard to overcome. Let's go ahead and fast forward and see how this last fight ends. I'm going to hit fast forward here as well. So again, you can see it's going to be a very long fight if this ever happens over here. We can assume, though, that the great swords are going to win that as well. 44 kills, 31 kills. Yeah, so trading damage for defense and attack doesn't seem to be a good trade. unless it's enough to make up for it. In this case, like, you're talking about, 32 attack and 30 defense versus 24 and 26, and even having the extra 8 weapon strength isn't enough to make up for it. Defense is a big deal, it's your unit deflecting hits. So having less defense is bad. It's very bad. So not only do the Graveguard have a lower attack, the Greatswords have a higher defense, which means that more often they're going to block shots. Kimmler's getting attacked over there, and I didn't notice it. Anyway, let's go ahead and concede defeat. So let's check that out. But yeah, so Greatswords will carry on. And I think the last unit I'm going to pit them up against is going to be the Bestigor herds. And we'll just kind of see how that plays out. But close match, but definitely still in favor of the Greatswords because we gave the Graveguard with Great Weapon the benefit of healing. Alright, our next test is going to be, since Bestigor won, it's going to be Bestigor versus Hammerers. So Bestigor costs 50 less. Hammerers have a lot more weapon damage and really high melee attack. They have equal armor. Actually slightly, it's more leadership, less charge bonus. So you would think Hammerers are going to do the best in this fight, potentially, where the charge bonus means a little less. But we'll see. Hammerers are a very strong unit in an anti-infantry fight. They do a lot of damage. They're a good unit. Good melee defense, good melee attack. I mean, really, their only downside is speed and charge bonus. And their charge bonus isn't terrible. It's just not as good as like a Black Orc or a Bestigor. Let's see how it plays out. These Bestigor were doing pretty good. I'm thinking it's their leadership that's going to betray them in the end, though. Dwarf leadership is very good. Trying to see what this magic resistance. Yeah. I knew that. All right, so Hammerers win. Then you straight up charge. It's a pretty convincing win. In the fight where the charge was less drastic, now this was just standard formation. You can see that the Bestigor actually wrapped the flank just a little bit here. And they're kind of wrapping the flank just a little bit here too. And this flank wrapping right here may be enough to hand this to the Bestigor, it looks like. Because they're winning pretty significantly here, whereas they lost in that one. This one looks like, if anything, the Bestigor may have gotten slightly surrounded in that fight. Because I think the dwarves spread a little bit wider. And yeah, look right there, in that fight, it looks like the Bestigor spread a little wider, and then they won that fight. Then over here, the Bestigor just taking the worst of it. I think somehow the Bestigor got the better position with a little bit of flanking here, and that's why they won that, while slightly losing this one maybe. And over here where, again, the fight was just more of a who wins the long-term slug out. In this case, the Hammerers win pretty decisively, so it's interesting. That's the first time we've seen a result that wasn't the same in all three fights, in terms of like who won. Obviously there were differences, but yeah, the Dawi are going to win 2 out of 3 there, which means that I'm going to go ahead and advance the Hammerers here as the next unit. So Bestigor a good unit, but they end up falling just a little bit short of the Hammerers in this case. Let's take a look at the outcome there. Yeah. I wish I knew which one was matched up against which, but it's kind of hard to tell. I'm assuming that this Bestigor was matched against that Hammer. Well, not necessarily. Yeah, it's hard to tell who was matched against who. So I don't really know how it lines up, but there's the kill. So pretty interesting, fairly even match. More even than I would have expected, to be honest. Alright, the next test is going to be Skaven Plague Monk Censer Bearers up against the Hammerers, since the Hammerers took control in the last fight. They should automatically charge. Here they go. So this is the column formation. So Plague Monk Censer Bearers have almost no armor, but they decrease the leadership of enemies. They have magical attacks, which will help them a lot if it's against anything that has physical resistance. They have huge weapon strength, and they get a bonus to it because of their Frenzy. And then same thing with charge bonus. They get a very good charge bonus. So Frenzy is always active if their leadership's above 50. And I think at the same time that makes them immune to psychology, as long as that's true. So Censer Bearer should pack a huge wallop on the charge. And I mean a huge wallop because of the way that their charge gets impacted. But they themselves, decent melee defense. I say decent, it's pretty much on par, but the lack of armor is an interesting one for them. Just very little armor. But they do, like I said, they impact leadership on other units. So let's see here. In the best case scenario where the Censer Bearers get a good charge, I mean, the Dwarves are still owning this fight. Yeah, Censer Bearer is a very good unit. And there's certain units I think that they're going to be more effective against. Like a Censer Bearer would be really good versus like a Phoenix Guard, I think. Because they have the magical attacks. But here, I mean, it's going to be a clear victory for the Dwarf Infantry there. Yeah, sorry, bumped that real quick. So going to be a clear victory for the Dwarf Infantry here in the center too. As that charge gets taken away from the Skaven, it just starts to be an even cleaner victory for the Dwarves. Let's go ahead and fast forward. Let's see how this one turns out where neither unit really got a charge at all. I think it's still going to come out in favor of the Hammer. So even though they debuff the leadership, Plague Monk Censer Bearers, again, more of a specialty unit here. It's more of a specialty unit. It's not meant to be this, and I can't say that Hammers are really meant to be a mainline infantry either. They're kind of a specialty unit in and of themselves. But as you can see, when it just comes into this headlong slug out, the Censer Bearer is just not going to get it done. They're going to have a purpose and they're going to be good, but not going to be able to hack it in that regard. So yeah, there you go. The Censer Bearer is just not getting near as many kills. Not near as many. The Hammers just have so much more armor, and the Censer Bearers don't. I mean, so you don't even need armor piercing for all that extra damage from the Hammers to come through, right? Whereas only the armor piercing that's coming through for the Censer Bearers is going to really have the biggest impact on the Hammers, and so not a terribly large surprise there. All right, one of the final tests here. Now we're getting into the big boys. So we're going to have Swordmasters of Hoeth taking on Hammers. Swordmasters of Hoeth have a bonus versus infantry that the Hammers don't. They also have martial prowess that gives them amazing melee defense and attack, and a pretty solid charge. I would expect the Swordmasters of Hoeth, they're going to take this one to the bank rather easily, because when you get into this kind of fight, like I said, you're playing with the big boys. That's going to earn me a grudge in the Book of Grudges, but that's all there is to it. That's all there is to it, folks. The Swordmasters are going to absolutely lay waste to the Hammers on the charge. Just lay waste to them. Bonus versus infantry and all that extra melee defense. It adds up. It adds up. Martial prowess is a very strong ability that comes on the high elf infantry. If you can keep their hit points above 50%, it's a huge buff to them. They get an extra 12 melee defense and 2 melee attack. So it makes the high elf armies much more survivable, turning even spearmen into a fairly tanky unit in the right scenarios. Yep, so again, another clear victory there. Let's just fast forward this last bit of fight between the Swordmaster and the Hammerer here. So it's just going to take longer because neither side really got as much of a charge bonus, but extremely clear victory for the Swordmasters, not even close. So Hammerers, great unit, out of their league when it gets to this tier though. That's all there is to it. The Dwarves just don't have an infantry unit that can stand on this tier because they have more artillery and skirmishers and gyrocopters and bombers and Ruin of Wrath and Ruin and stuff like that. So there you go. That's the outcome. Let's concede the defeat here, even though it was a victory. So Swordmasters of Hoeth are going to continue forward. Yeah, easy victory. There's a few things I'm not going to test. So we're not going to test Phoenix Guard. That's because they're kind of an anti-large unit. Same thing with Blackguard. Same thing with Temple Guard. I'm not going to test those units, even though some of them are decent. I should have tested White Lions earlier, and I didn't. I missed out on them, so we'll look at them in a separate test because I missed them. So we'll come back and we'll kind of see where White Lions fit in and how good they are. I definitely should have tested them earlier, but I didn't. Let's carry on, which means that one of the main units remaining is going to be Harganeth Executioners. Okay, some of you may be saying, Heir, you haven't tested Blackworks. Yeah, we'll bring them in. I haven't forgot about them. We'll bring them in. I should have brought them in a little sooner, but we'll bring them in. This is going to be the... Oh, I missed a charge order there. So this fight's going to be... This one right here is going to be invalid, because I missed a charge order. These other two definitely had clear charge orders, but somehow I misclicked a move order there instead of a charge order. So we'll see. We'll see. But, I mean, again, charge bonus doesn't make as much difference in this fight, but it could still make a difference. Now, if you look at this, Swordmasters of Hoeth are going to win big. They're going to win big because of the martial prowess. But you see right there where their hit points came down and martial prowess turns off? You're now going to see the Hargoneth Executioners pick up a little bit of steam there, and it's because the Executioners do more damage. It's just that the martial prowess makes the Swordmasters win big early. And again here, I mean, look how substantial this victory is here. Executioners are a really fantastic unit, and pound for pound in just like prolonged combat, I think they're probably the best out there. If martial prowess isn't a thing, but it is a thing. It's a thing. It's the High Elves thing. And I think if it were not for martial prowess, the Hargoneth Executioners probably would be the best. But like I said, it is here, and you're still going to see a significant victory for the Swordmasters of Hoeth. Significant victory. They're also more expensive, I believe, too. This last fight is kind of null and void, but we'll let it play out. Yeah, I mean, the martial prowess just gives a huge advantage to the High Elves, because that's a lot of melee defense. 12 melee defense is a lot of melee defense. When it goes away, again, the Executioners start making a difference. It's just they've taken such a beating during the time that martial prowess was active, and this was with the Swordmaster that didn't even have a charge order, and it still won. So, I mean, in my opinion, if you want to know who is the best of the best in terms of anti-infantry infantry, especially armored infantry, it's going to be Swordmasters of Hoeth. They're the best. I think Hargoneth Executioners are an interesting one. They're probably a close second. I tell you what we'll do though real quick is we're going to test Blackworks up against the Swordmasters just to be sure. Okay, here we go. Blackworks versus Swordmasters of Hoeth. I am going to do one thing different though. I am going to use the Wa. When I get my Lord within range to use it, I mean, I could have used it right here in the charge, but I'm going to use it on these two units over here, because Wa is something that's standard for greenskins. I mean, every Lord carries it, and I think it's only fair since, you know, these guys get to use martial prowess. Let's just see what happens. If the Black Orcs win, we can try it without Wa and see what happens. I'm pretty sure without Wa, though, that the Swordmasters take it home, but again, Wa is pretty common. It does not stretch across the entire battlefield, but you do have Wa and you have Here We Go. Those two things are going to give the greenskins a significant advantage in almost every infantry fight. So remember, this fight over here not impacted by Wa. This fight over here, whenever we engage the Wa, Swordmasters of Hoeth got wrecked. Wrecked by a unit that cost quite a bit less. Now, I kept the High Elf Lord close enough that there was hopefully some leadership support here too. Again, just to be fair. Here, this fight, now see, martial prowess is gone now though. So this one's going to get more interesting in the center. This one got rid of the martial prowess on the elves very quickly because of the charge bonus and then the Wa. And that puts the Swordmasters in a bad place. When they lose that martial prowess really quickly like that, it's not good for them. See, like this unit over here that's maintained it, it's doing a whole lot better versus the Black Orcs. So if you're going to be fighting the Greenskins as the High Elves, you really need to find a way to help out against that Wa, like some kind of debuff, interrupt the charge bonus, whatever it is. If you can interrupt that charge bonus, you know, see right here where the charge wasn't as wide. Both of these units, though, Wa worked for both units. But where the Black Orc wasn't able to capitalize on that charge bonus as much, look at this, the Swordmaster's going to win. It's going to be the same story over here, Swordmaster's going to win. So you've got to maximize your charge bonus as the Greenskins, and you're going to have to use that Wa to your advantage. So I think if you combined Wa with Here We Go, and you really knew you were going to be in some kind of Swordmaster versus Black Orc fight, yeah, the Black Orcs are probably the better unit in that case because they cost less and they can be buffed by both of those things. But just when it comes to pound for pound better unit, now granted the Swordmaster of Hoeth costs quite a bit more. It's 1,300 instead of 1,150, but kind of the purpose of this test was to find out who is the best and the baddest. It's an interesting call. I could see it going either way. I could see it being greenskins with some of that support. We'd have to do a little more testing, but I really think that the only fair way to call it is that Swordmasters of Hoeth are the biggest and the baddest and the greatest in terms of taking down enemy armored infantry. So there you have it. Swordmasters of Hoeth, folks. Oh, wait. Not quite. We're forgetting Chosen. Alright, seriously though, this is going to be the final test. Chosen with great weapons at the highest cost of any standard infantry in the game. We're not counting regiments of renown. These guys come in at 1450. Their stats actually match the Swordmasters in terms of attack and defense, even without martial prowess, and they have more armor by a lot. I would expect the Chosen probably win this fight. Meaning that hands down, Chosen, when it just comes pound for pound, even though I make fun of them because of the patch notes, some of you might be like, Heir, you're such a hypocrite. You talked about how bad Chosen were earlier. It's because this test actually allows a player to test their best unit against yours, right? That doesn't happen on the multiplayer battlefield. No one's going to go sacrifice a unit into your Chosen. They're going to shoot your Chosen with artillery, Dragon Breath, Skirmishers, Vortex spells, Fate of Buna, you name it. Your Chosen is going to become the subject of it. Cavalry charges, monsters, whatever you can throw at it. So on the charge, hands down, Chosen are the best infantry in the game, and that's probably why Creative Assembly continues to do the patching with these guys that they do. But there's just so many other factors that play into a battle, especially a multiplayer battle, that make Chosen a very undesirable unit for multiplayer battles in almost every scenario. Not every scenario, almost every scenario. So again, think about that. So I am going to give Chosen, I mean, unless these two fights go wildly different, I'm going to give Chosen the award as the best anti-infantry in terms of heavy armor, anti-armor, that kind of thing. These guys do look awesome. Very cool looking. Yeah, so, I mean, Chosen definitely seem to be that unit, and they're going to win this one. Here in the center, let's go ahead and fast forward. And I think they'll win the one over there in the blocky formation as well. It's just that martial prowess will have lasted longer in this one, probably making it fairly close. So Chosen, pretty clear victories too, because this is only 60 units up against 75. So Chosen are just, I mean, they are, in terms of stats, they're a good unit. They're just artillery bait. That's all there is to it. They have a big target on them that says, please destroy me, I'm a high value target, hit me, and I will make your spells, artillery, and missiles worth it. Alright, so there are a few units that I probably forgot and should have included. So I'm kind of throwing these in. One of the ones that I almost forgot to do is Iron Breakers. They're not really an anti-armor type of infantry, but because of their blasting charges, I think it's worth taking a look. And since Chosen came out on top, the Chosen with great weapons, I'm going to test these Iron Breakers by running straight into the Iron Breakers. I'm going to give the Iron Breaker every advantage it needs. I'm going to run the Chosen in 3 different formations directly at the Iron Breakers. And they are set to a defensive formation where they'll continue to throw their blasting charges to try and maximize the damage that they can cause. So I'm going to go headlong. Again, maximizing the advantage of the Iron Breakers, letting them throw all their blasting charges. Look at this. That unit got the most disrupted. So this disrupts the charge of the oncoming unit. And I don't think these Iron Breakers have a chance, to be honest. But again, it's fair. Someone mentioned it. We'll let it happen. So again, we're just going to let the Iron Breakers take the charge, because that's a best case scenario for Iron Breakers. You don't want to countercharge. You want to throw all your blasting charges. So let's fast forward, see what happens. It's going to be a long slug out here. Iron Breakers actually have more armor, And they have 68 melee defense, which is a lot. But their melee attack is pretty low, and they don't have a high armor-piercing weapon damage. And despite the fact that their blasting charges do tremendous damage, I mean, I did this test mostly just because people were probably going to complain that I didn't bring Iron Breakers because they're really expensive infantry. I mean, this isn't their kind of fight. This honestly isn't what they're intended to do. Iron Breakers are not meant to go against an anti-armor unit like this. What they are is they can help support a main line by disrupting enemy charges. They can be very, very good against unarmored units, but as you see, a heavily armored unit, can they do some damage to it with the blasting charges? Absolutely. But can they defeat it? Absolutely not. These guys are meant to hold and disrupt. In campaign, you can use them en masse, and they can be very effective because you can buff them. You can buff them a lot. You can use runesmiths to help these guys out. So a runesmith that dropped like Wrath and Ruin on these Chosen, you know, that might actually swing the fight. It might do it. But I'm just saying, in a head-to-head matchup like this, it's not going to work. Again, if Thorgrim was around buffing, if runesmiths were around buffing, Thanes, all those other things, you know, there's a lot of scenarios. Could the Iron Breakers do really well? I think so, and I think that result shows here that under the right circumstances, you know, perhaps they could do well. And if you look at it, I mean, they hold on for an extremely long time against a unit that's pretty superior and costs quite a bit more. I mean, they cause significant damage. But yeah, Iron Breakers not going to win that fight. So there you go. Pretty close fight there, but still a victory. So there you go, folks. There you go. Chosen with great weapons. Best infantry unit in Total War Warhammer 2. If we're not counting monstrous infantry, which at some point we have to look at. But yes, best infantry unit. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Appreciate you being here. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you next time. What kind of unit test do you want to see then?